Hey everybody, going through a self-awareness list, trying to live this out. Fake never wins. It's like the culture we're living in pays us to pretend. Like, the more than you can pretend you don't look like this, think like that, the more you can pretend like you belong to this group, the more you can pretend that you're something that you're not, it seems like the more likes you get, the more interaction you can get. So how do we combat? Okay, this will be my next one. It wasn't going to be my next one, but it's going to be my next one now. Number 4, when I pretended to be humble. And here's the thing about humility, vulnerability, accountability. It's almost become a trendy thing, right? It's almost cool to talk about my mental health issues. It's almost cool to talk about these are the ways I struggle. It's become almost now like a marketing thing, right? How can companies make themselves personable and approachable? But it's kind of disgusting to do it to reap some sort of reward. How about we value authenticity for authenticity? And so as a pastor, and still today, I can give you enough, and maybe that's what I'm doing here. I can give you enough for you to say, oh, that's so humble, oh, that's so honest, oh, that's so vulnerable, but not actually give you enough for you to say, damn, that person's messed up. They need some help. I'm not going to be listening to this dude, right? And so we've learned the art of pretending as opposed to depending. And I know that's a play on words on English, but I would suggest that the invitation of the age, when it seems like the system is asking us to be all these things that we're not, including, right, being vulnerable enough to appear authentic, I suggest that we eliminate those masks and maybe actually face the worst of each other, not to condemn or to put down, but to liberate and to actually have honest conversations about what we think, about who we are, about what we're struggling with, about how good things are. Like, sometimes it happens to me. I have this wonderful family, beautiful children. I love the work that I'm doing. I absolutely love the team that I'm working with. I love the space that I'm in. I love living in Puerto Rico. And sometimes I feel almost like, don't give too much of the good. I got to pretend a little bit something's bad, when sometimes there's seasons that are just so wonderful. And so what if we're fully authentic in the highs and the lows to be exactly who we are? And so instead of pretending to be humble, what if we actually practice the art of humility? Which, and I'm sorry that I'm not quoting, because this is like a quote that's been spread around and modified so many ways. But humility is not thinking less of yourself in terms of value. It's thinking less of yourself in terms of quantity, right? So it's not thinking less of yourself like you're inferior, thinking less of yourself because you're actually involved in other people's lives, because you're actually serving your neighbor, because you actually engage with the community where you can be your authentic self. So that's number 4. Number 5, when I book too many meetings. All right, so what's the problem with a meeting? I think the problem I have now is I don't book meetings, and we're just going from one thing to the other. But the problem, especially in the church world, it's just meeting after meeting to talk about the same things. But as a leader, I feel like what I was communicating by calling another meeting was, I don't trust you. I need to have another meeting to reconfirm that past meeting, to then have another meeting to see how things are going, because I actually don't trust the people that I'm working with. And so I too many meetings, church meetings. We need to have more church meetings so that people spend more time in church, because we don't trust them in the world. We don't trust them without us, the system of the church that tells them how to think and how to pray and how to worship and how to give and how to use their money. And there's this patronizing thing with having so many meetings. And who loves like a Zoom meeting? David, do you like a Zoom meeting? Who loves a Zoom meeting? It's just like you're just like, here we go. Do we really have to say this? I've seen some memes around. Can this just be an email? I would suggest that 90% of meetings can be just an email or a well-communicated text. Or, I know some people hate it. I love sending voice messages. They can hear my voice, they can hear my tone, right? And I don't have to turn it into a meeting. But there's just like this addiction, right? And I think it comes from control, because we're so afraid to be out of control. And we're so afraid because we feel so out of control in here that we're trying to control out here. And then we fall in the trap of trying to control other people. You can barely control yourself, baby. I can barely control myself, right? We have to be so aware that there's so many highs and lows, emotions, moments, things that are literally beyond our control. And most of the time it's people.
Is there any of your beliefs where, when you were a pastor, a mechanism of control for yourself or your family or the people that you were guiding?
I think that was mostly what it was, unfortunately.
What is specific? What type of beliefs?
Great question. So, how can I get people to do more stuff at church without having to hire them and pay them?
Talk about that, please.
Let's use a lot of family language. This is a family. And I know there's scripture to support that. And I know there is value, right? In communicating belonging. We're all looking to belong. I believe that so many of the errors of theology, of ethics, of politics we'll fall for whatever as long as we belong. Because ultimately we want to belong to a group, to a people, to a statement, to an idea, right? Eventually belong to a community. I think it is as simple as that. And so we fall for so many traps. You look at, like, you watch a documentary on like cults, right, from the past, whether Christian or not, the craziness human beings believe in just so they can stay belonging. And so maybe this is number 5 without trying, I, as a pastor, fell into the trap of using the language of family to control people. Because with the family, well, we need the family to help because we have this great conference where I'm going to be the speaker at that conference, and I'm going to have the microphone at that conference, and I'm going to sell my book at that conference. But it's a family event, so we need all hands on deck. We need volunteers and people to be and take care of the parking, and people to be in charge, to be the ushers, and people to take up the offering, and then to go to the back to count the offering immediately. And then and the language that I would use, a language of family, humility, serving Jesus. Again, you can find scripture for that. You can find good arguments about to do anything, you really need a group of people. And I can say that here in this space. To achieve anything that we have achieved, we need an amazing team. I have an amazing group of people that do incredible work. But in the church world, I don't want to pay those people, so I'm going to make them feel bad about them having to be here because number 1, it's good for their spiritual life. Number 2, it's a family. So you got to stand up for your family. You got to show up for your family. You got to help your family. When really, I would use the language of building the kingdom of God when I was really building the kingdom of Carlos. That's the truth. And so being aware of that, being aware that the temptation in my heart was, how can I use other people while not letting them know they're being used so that I can build something that's meaningful to me?
I got a very hard question.
Please.
I don't expect a complete answer to this question because it seems like impossible to really answer it, but I want to make it, if it makes spark some interesting conversation.
Yeah.
If you were right now obligated to become a pastor once again in Raleigh, North Carolina, the same church, the same kind of amount of money coming in, everything.
Yeah.
What would you do different now?
Dang, bro.
Having this in context, you just said.
I have no choice. I have to do it. If I have no choice, I have to do it. There's definitely an element of... What a good question. Okay, I need to think about it. You guys, you can let me think about it. Yeah, let me think about it, because this is such a good question, and it's worth answering. What would I do differently? Okay, so here's a new list. Number 1, I wouldn't force my family to be part of my job, pretending like it's part of our eternity and salvation, right? being a pastor was my job. It's a job that I enjoyed doing. I'm not going to pretend like I don't enjoy speaking, sharing my life with others. I love being on a stage. I love the crowd. I love having interactions. I love the give and take. I love making mistakes and learning. I love the risk of it. I do. I enjoy it. I love it. I think there's value to it. But I would force my family to be at every meeting and be at the front. And I got to force the kids to behave well. And I got to force the wife to be the supportive wife. First thing I would do, forget all that. Be honest about the fact that it's a job. And actually, theologically speaking, it's just as important as any other job. So as a janitor, as a teacher, as a doctor, as a farmer, they're just as important. And so being a pastor, the mentality is like, this is the most important job. It isn't. It's just another job. Does it have the potential to be extremely impactful to people who are, in a way, opening up their lives because they're part of a congregation that's coming on a weekly basis? Of course. It has the potential to be extremely influential. But we would be lying to ourselves that it's not as important as anything else, because everything else is as holy and as godly as being a pastor. So that would be number one. Not force my family to anything of it. And we've heard horror stories of pastors' kids that they're the people that want the least to do. And I'm generalizing, it's not everybody. The least to do with church and ministry and anything that has to do with Jesus, God, whatever, because of being forced to pretend, not just attend the meeting, but pretend to be something they were not. And so horrific stories of LGBTQ youth that have committed suicide because their whole thing was, you can't be that. Like that's a sin. So pretend you're something that you're not. It's just terrible and ungodly and dangerous. And one of the reasons why I'm still not why I'm not there. Number two, what would I do differently? Definitely listen more. Listen to understand, not listen to respond, which is, it's a good question, David, because I have to answer these questions honestly, even for my role now, right? They're just as valid. What would I do different now? I can still improve a billion things. And one of the things I need to continually remind myself is listen to understand. The person who's speaking, don't listen so that you get a good answer back, a good response to what they're saying. Don't listen to make sure that you win the argument. Listen to make sure that you win a heart, that you win a new friend, that you win a deeper relationship, or that you win clarity in a relationship that shouldn't be, and you can go your separate ways. It doesn't have to be that everybody's best friends. And so extremely important and if I would have to go back to that same job, learn to listen to understand. The third thing I would do is as I'm listening to understand, I want to give that person, and whoever that person would be, whether somebody from the congregation, somebody that used to be part of the congregation, they're not, just like clarity, absolute clarity. And I regret that I learned so many tricks to say something enough to keep them happy with me, the pastor, but not really say what I was trying to say. And that dance, right, of, oh, we think differently. Oh, yeah, I see what you're saying. Oh, yeah. And all these little tricks, instead of just saying, wow, I see it so differently to you. This is how I see it. Can we still be friends? Like, can we disagree? And then number 4, I would be even more clear. These are the things that I can't even disagree. These are principles that I have that I'm not willing to cross these lines. And I think we're so afraid, especially in the church world, again, that whole illusion that we're all family and we have to all be best friends, whatever. Like, there's some boundaries that you need to have. There's some people that you just don't click, and that's okay. Actually, it would be better for that person and for yourself to never engage, to not be friends. Like, I would say it's an opportunity of maturity that I would try to have the courage to be as clear and as direct as possible. I think those would be my answers. Many more, but I would have to think a long time. ¿Está cogiendo? A long time. All right. One more. Let's do one more. Okay. A short one. Easy. I think this is number 7 or number 8. By next podcast, I'll make sure the numbers are right. How about that? The next one. Easy. When I started to fall in love with Western Christianity, which was a dumb decision, a waste of energy, space, emotion, because Jesus was born in modern-day Palestine, in the Middle East. And so there's this version of Western Christianity that is so capitalistic, so focused on the taking instead of the giving, so focused on the action instead of the people. And every time I get to go to the Middle East, and even living here in Puerto Rico, and I want to honor my culture in terms of, let's sit down and let's just eat pizza, which just happened like 20 something minutes ago. And let's just talk about life, and let's hang out, and let's make fun, and let's have some jokes, and let's pet the dog, as opposed to like, let's get things done. And so Western Christianity, unfortunately, and I can be clear about this because I was a pastor in it, I benefited from it. So I have to be honest with you. I benefited from that culture. I sold books in that world. I got paid honorariums for speaking on stages in that world. And it's mostly entertainment. It's mostly fake. It's mostly for the benefit of the few. And I think Christianity, in its pure essence, and you don't even have to be a Christian to understand that really the simplest things that Jesus said that are so eternal, like do unto others as you would like them to do to you. Things that are so lovely and eternal, like love your neighbor, serve the least, forgive debts, things that we would all love to experience. And if the world would, in general, if we would all just agree on these basic principles, without having to force and impose certain beliefs and theological statements upon each other. And I want to read this specifically because it's something that I've written a few times, and sometimes it's just easier for me to read it back to you because I usually forget what I said. Jesus is the leader who never started a war, who never used a weapon, who never had an army, who never used violence as a solution. Jesus is the leader who never bombed children, who never took revenge on his enemies, and who never will. He was born in modern-day Palestine, not Anaheim, California. He spoke Hebrew, Greek, and Aramaic, not English. Western Christianity cannot contain Jesus as he is. See you next week.